I'm going to talk a little bit about decimal place value before we get into discussing operations with decimals. In the past, we talked about whole number place value, and we're going to continue to talk about place value, but mainly focusing on decimal numbers. And so whole numbers were the numbers that were to the left of this decimal point here. And the decimal numbers are numbers generally to the right of the decimal point. Okay, now these numbers are going to represent numbers that are less than 1. And so if you remember some of the whole number place values, I'll just kind of draw some lines here. And there's certainly more that go in this direction. And then there are also more that go in this direction. But let's just start here. I'll go ahead and fill in some numbers. So 340 or 3,452 and 1986. Okay. So just as a review, this is the ones place, tens place, hundreds place, thousands place, and then if you had some other digits beyond that 3, we'd go 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, and so on. But here we have the decimal point, and all the digits that are to the right of the decimal point are representing numbers that are less than 1. So this amount here represents a little more than 3,452, but not quite 3,453. So this first place here is the tenths. Then we have the hundredths. Next are thousandths. And the 6 is going to be the 10,000ths. Trying to make sure I say the THS. It's a little hard to say, but if you see a THS at the end of the name of the place value, that's kind of a hint telling you that those place values are decimal place values. So, for instance, just as a comparison, here's ones, tens. Notice it just ends with an S, not a THS. Same with hundreds, thousands, and so on. Okay, well, let's go ahead and talk about how we would say decimal numbers and how you might write them out. And then we're also going to talk about how you would write them in expanded form, and then also a little bit on rounding decimal numbers. So let's say we have 1.6. Now, oftentimes people will say 1.6, and that's it's an acceptable form. But if we're going to talk about it mathematically, let's do it correctly. This is 1 and 6 tenths. The 6 is in the tenths place, so we would say 6, the number is 6, and the last digit, or the digit in the last place, is in the tenths place. So if I were to write this, I would write 1 and 6 tenths. Now notice the and is going to represent the decimal point right there. Let's do another. Let's say we have 3.05, and again I would write this or say this as 3 and 5 hundredths, because it's that 5 is in the hundredths place. So if I were to write it, it would look like this: 3 and 5 hundredths. make sure you put those THS on the end of these place values. Okay. Let's say we have 2.25, but that's not how we say it. We say it 2 and 25 hundredths. Again, the last digit is in the hundredths place, so that's the place value that we express. So 2 and 20-5 hundredths. Again, THS. Let's do 4.168. This is really 4 and 168 thousandths. This is in the thousandths place. So 4 and 160-8 thousandths. All right. Now let's do some others that, normally we're not going to go much further than this. We might have a number that's in 10 thousandths, but let's go ahead and do one of those. Let's say we have 0.0102. Now, how we're going to read this is 102 10 thousandths, because this is tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10 thousandths. So that last digit's in the 10 thousandths place. That's the place value we're going to say. So we'll go 100 to 10 thousandths. Okay. Now let's do one more. Let's make a really crazy one. Let's say we got one. Well, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10 thousandths, 100 thousandths, millions. So this would be 4 millionths. And again, THS on the end. And that's how you would say it, and that's also how you would write it. Now let's go ahead and write these, or write some numbers in expanded form. And I'll give you an example. When we talked about whole numbers, like say 435, we wrote it as 400 plus 30 plus 5, and that would be in expanded form. Okay, this is considered standard form. This is expanded form. So standard, expanded. All right, so if we had, say, 3 and 5 tenths, we would write that as 3 plus, and instead of writing it as a decimal, we're going to write it as a fraction. So it's going to be 5 tenths. Okay, so say we had 14.32 or 14 and 32 hundredths, it would be 10 plus 4 plus 3 tenths plus 2 hundredths. Notice the 3 is in the tenths place, so the denominator is a 10. The 2 is in the hundredths place, so again we're going to represent that as 2 hundredths. Let's say we have 3 and 591 thousandths. So 3 plus 5 tenths plus 9 hundredths plus 1 thousandths. And let's make a big number. Let's say we have 5,000 27 and 411 10,000ths. So 5,000. We don't have hundreds, so we're going to do 10. So 20 plus 7. We don't have tenths, but we have 4 hundredths. We have 1 thousandths and 1 10,000ths. And that's how you would write these standard decimal mixed numbers into expanded form. Let's now talk about rounding. And rounding is very similar to rounding with whole numbers. For instance, let's first round to the nearest whole number. So if I have 1 and 4 tenths, I first want to identify my whole number, and that's going to be in this position right here. And like before, we're going to look to the right of that whole number. Okay, and I'm basically going to say to myself, 5 and above, give it a shove. 4 and below, keep it low. So because this is 4 or low or below, this is going to be just 1. And remember when we talked about the number lines? So if I have 1 and 2, and halfway is going to be 1.5. So here's 1, here's 2, 1 and 5 tenths, or 1.5. 1 and 4 tenths is going to be about here. And you can see that that's closer to 1 than it is the 2. Okay, let's do a couple more. Let's say we have 6 and 5 tenths. And we want to round to the nearest whole number. So again, here's our whole number. We want to look to the tenths place, or the digit right next door to the right. 5 and above, give it a shove. That's going to be a 7. Okay, let's now round to the nearest tenth. So say we have 11 and 38 hundredths. 11 and 38 hundredths. So again, we want to identify the tenths. That's going to be here. We're going to look right next door to the right. 5 and above, give it a shove. That's going to round to 4 tenths. So that will be 11 and 4 tenths. And again, if we were going to look at a number line, we've got 11 and 3 tenths and 11 and 4 tenths. And we want to know, let's see, so halfway would be 11 and 35 hundredths, because really this is 30 hundredths and this is 40 hundredths. So halfway would be 35 hundredths, and since 38 hundredths is probably around here, it's going to be closer to 11 and 40 hundredths, or 11 and 4 tenths. And so that would be your answer. Notice I don't have a 0. I'm going to drop any numbers that go past the 4, because this is what I'm rounding to. I'm rounding to the tenth. All other, the zeros would be dropped. So I'm not going to write it as 11 and 40 hundredths. Let's round to the nearest hundredths. say I have 45 and how about so 45 and 13 hundredths, or excuse me, 13 thousandths. So again, I want to identify the hundredths. It's this 1. I'm going to look next door. That 3 is less than 5, so I'm going to just keep it at that 1, and then I'm going to drop that 3. So it becomes 45 and 1/100ths. And let's round to the nearest thousandths. Okay, so let me just make up another number here. 2,242 and 9,999. Okay. Sometimes you get tricky ones like this. Again, we want to identify the thousandths. That's going to be in this position, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. We want to look right next door to the right. 5 and above, give it a shove. Now notice this is a 9. So, and if you remember before when we talked about whole numbers, each place value can have 10 possible digits to take that place. 0 through 9. We can't write in a 10. Okay, that's a 2-digit number. So this 9 bumps this 9 to a 10, which is going to be a 0, but then we're going to basically carry that 1 to the tenths, and then that 9 plus 1 becomes 10, so that becomes a 0, and then we're going to bump that, carry that 1 over, so 9 plus 1 becomes another 10, and then we're going to bump that 1 over here, which will become a 3. So now we've got 2,243 followed by 3 zeros. Now notice I am going to keep those 3 zeros because I'm rounding to the nearest thousandths place. If I was only rounding to the to the ones place, then I wouldn't have to write out those numbers. But I'm going to go ahead and keep those 3 zeros to represent thousandths place. Now, generally speaking, it's not a big deal. However, if you're building things and you're reading blueprints, tolerance comes into play, and you can have different tolerance levels depending on how many place values you have. And so in that respect, you're going to want to keep it at 2,243 followed by 3 zeros, or 0 thousandths. Like before, if you have questions, go ahead and ask in class and we'll do some more examples.